Hello. The theme for this yoga practice will be the constellation Cassiopeia and the bright stars that make up a well-defined and easily recognizable asterism in that area of the sky. The yin sequence itself consists of only 4 yin postures. The first one is a yoga squat. The second one will be both sides of Cattail Pose, and then the last posture will be a supported bridge pose that I call the Milky Way Pose. And for that one, we'll definitely need a firm prop to place underneath your lower torso. So if you have 1 or 2 yoga blocks, those will probably prove to be the most useful. But if you don't have blocks, you can use firm books instead. Another useful prop might be a basic chair for a restorative posture that I will suggest during the resting or Savasana portion of the practice. Otherwise, basic things like pillows and blankets would be good things to have around. So maybe gather up some props and we'll get started. This practice begins with a little bit of breath work and then 1 yang exercise before we move into the longer held yin postures. So find a comfortable seat. It can be sitting cross-legged like this. It can be sitting in a chair. If you sit in a chair, sit far enough forward so that your back is not resting on the chair. That way you can maintain integrity in your torso and your spine with a little bit of toning through your torso here. If you need to make modifications to sitting on the floor or sitting up on some padding, feel free to do so. So I always kind of introduce a practice this way to let you know that it's okay to sit some way that's reasonable. This beginning pose is called, the Sanskrit name is called Sukasana, and it means easy pose, and it's really meant to feel easy. So if you're doing something that's not easy, then it's not really easy pose. So if you can sit cross-legged like I'm doing, that's great. But if some other way is more accessible, then always a good idea to start a practice that way here. Wiggle around, find some sense of stability and groundedness in this posture. Begin to allow your mind to clear and allow yourself permission to welcome yourself into practice. This is why intention setting is so important. Is if you set an intention for practice, more likely you'll begin to feel that sense of groundedness, that sense of purpose in your yoga practice. And then find something that's happening in the present moment. One of the most accessible and universal things is noticing your breath. But you can notice the sounds around you, you can notice the temperature of the room, you can notice other physical sensations going on in your body. This is the time to do all of that. And then once you've done that, use your breath to quiet the muscles in your face, to quiet the thoughts in your brain. And then deepen your breath by slowing it down ever so subtly here. And I will introduce a type of breathing visualization that has something to do with the night sky, with stars. I call it variable star breathing. So it turns out a lot of the stars that we see in the night sky are called variables, and they're called variables because they vary in brightness. They get brighter and they get less bright, and they cycle through brightness, much like our breath cycles. So as you can imagine, you can visualize your breath as the cycles of a variable star. So one type of variable star actually varies because it's physically getting bigger. And as it gets bigger, it releases more photons, more light. And then as it gets smaller in its cycle, it releases less photons and is less bright. That's the common types of variables. So you can set up that visualization in your mind as you breathe. So as you're breathing, visualize yourself as this variable stars. On your inhale, you expand through the body and through the torso, and you're getting bigger You're a star and you're getting bigger and brighter. And then as you slowly exhale, you're contracting and you're getting slightly dimmer here. So you're mimicking in your mind this pulsation of what's known as a radial variable star. As you inhale, you expand, become larger and brighter. As you exhale, you contract and momentarily become less bright or darker here. So you can continue that visualization and do this at your own pace for the next 2 or 3 breaths. Just imagine yourself as this variable star, getting brighter as you bring in air on an inhale, and it's getting slightly dimmer as you exhale here. So one more breath. You can continue with that visualization. I'll bring up another type of variable star that is seen in the night sky. This kind of variable star gets brighter and darker because it's throwing off material. It's letting go of material in its cycle of variability. So you can think of it throwing off gas and dust that kind of obscures the star. That makes it darker. And then it kind of clears away, and because it clears away, it becomes brighter before it sheds off the next shell of gas and dust. So you can change the visualization, if you will. So on the inhale, you become all clear of this shell of leftover material that's not useful anymore. And then as you exhale, exhale is this letting go of this shell of dust and material and things that aren't useful or serve you anymore. And then because of that, on the inhale, you grow bright again. And then on the exhale, you're expanding that shell of unneeded material out. This is an actual kind of variable star. There's dozens of different reasons why stars vary, and I'm just touching on 2 of them, so you can keep up that visualization for 2 or 3 more breaths here. And then just return to a normal, natural breath, kind of wake yourself up. And we'll get started with a little bit of a yang practice here. So in ancient times, the constellation Cassiopeia, well, Cassiopeia is the name of a queen of Ethiopia that comes from Greek mythology. And she was often depicted as sitting on a throne. And the stars that were seen in the sky were often seen as in thousands of years ago, as actually the chair or the throne that the Queen of Ethiopia actually sat in. So it was often known as the throne of Ethiopia. So we'll actually practice this yang posture known as chair pose, just as a quick warm-up. So you'll have to stand up, come to a firm stance where your feet are comfortable with a natural width apart. So depending on who you are, it might be anywhere from feet together to all the way out to maybe feet shoulder width apart. So you have to experiment to see where your stable stance is. And then you bend your knees, bend your hips, try to keep some slight toning in your core and your torso fairly straight. And this is called chair pose. It's a yang posture because in order to maintain your balance and the integrity of the posture, muscles in your core, in your legs have to be engaged, and you feel that. So if you stay here for a long time, this gets pretty tiring here. Hands can be just out at your sides, or you can raise your arms to just point forward. Or you can raise your arms up alongside your ears, and you can sink more deeply for more intensity. You can move your knees back to create more intensity. You can sit even deeper for more intensity, or less deep if this is getting too painful here. Stay here for a breath, and then slowly come out. Rest for a while. We'll do one more round of chair pose. This is yang yoga, not yin. So it's the complement of yin. This is with muscle engagement. So sink yourself back into your chair pose, your throne pose here. Just for a moment here, decide how much intensity you want. And then stay here for maybe one more breath, just to engage the core a little bit. So we want to balance yin and yang here. And then go ahead and bring yourself up. You can fold forward, maybe bend your knees a lot to bring yourself all the way down onto the floor. And we'll get ready for the first long-held yin posture. And the first long-held yin posture will be, I basically call it yoga squat. The Sanskrit name is Malasana. And so basically you just to come into a squat, maybe you want to come back up to standing, feet spread pretty wide, turn the toes out, knees bend out to either side, and then you just slowly lower your hips and your torso until they stop for you. And you might have to adjust your feet here. Now, for some people, this is a very natural and easy place to be in. So it's naturally yin for them. There's no muscle engagement here. They're already perfectly balanced. They can stay here for half an hour if they want to. If you're like that, then this is your posture. This is not a yin posture for me. I have to engage a lot of muscle to maintain balance in this pose here. So I can do this, but this is not really yin because I have a lot of muscles engaged here. So this is where I need props. So I'll take a block or two, depending on how much height I need, and then place the block underneath my sits bones so that I can take the element of balance out of this squat here. And then maybe I can relax the muscles and make this a yin posture in that I still feel my stopping points and the traction and the tension in the hips, in the knees, in the feet here. But I no longer have to intensely engage muscle, so I can stay here for a while here. And again, I've set the block at my height. You might need more books, more blocks, less books, less blocks. Maybe you need to stay pretty high up, so if you have the chair that I suggested, you can do Malasana. Just seated in a chair, legs out in front, and then just move the legs out as wide as they can. Again, keep your torso far enough away from the back of the chair. And then if you're feeling a lot here in your hips, then this can be your Malasana. One final variation for this pose is wide-legged child's pose, or baby frog. So if Malasana is not working for you, you come onto hands and knees, bring your knees mat width apart, and then lower your torso, lower your arms. This variation can also work as a gentle hip opener if yoga squat is not working for you. Otherwise, we'll try to stay here for another 3 minutes or so. So find a place, find your stopping point, find your shape in this posture here. And you can just sit here with a nice neutral spine. You can fold forward slightly. You can even do some wrist work in this posture. So what some people like to do is they like to take a prayer position with the hands and then press the arm bones into the sides of the legs, and then you can do this in a yin fashion by sort of locking the bones off here. And you maybe get a nice compression in the wrists here. So that's some wrist yin that you can do. Fingers can point up, fingers can point down. What I like to do is I like to invert my hands and press the backs of my hands together to get a compression in the wrist, because it feels pretty intense for me. So it's a nice good yin stretch for the wrists for me in this position. Or you can just do whatever with your arms here. So about another 1.5 minutes here in yoga squat. I'd like to talk about the one of the brightest and most recognizable asterisms in the night sky. It's in the northern sky. It's a circumpolar constellation, so it's very close to this North Celestial Pole or the North Star. And it's opposite the Big Dipper. So the Big Dipper is one of the most brightest asterisms in the sky to recognize. And another one is one on the other side of the North Star, which is known as Cassiopeia. It looks like it's a zigzag pattern of second magnitude stars that is often described as a W. It can be described as an M, or the time in the fall or the winter in the early evening, it's actually sideways, so it looks like a zigzag 3 shape. But it's one of the most recognizable pattern of stars in the sky. So and if you notice it, then you know you're looking in the north, and you know you're looking close to the North Star. So it's an easy and important group of stars to look at here. So maybe about 2 or 3 more breaths here in yoga squat here. And then go ahead and release your wrists. If you were using your wrists, you can kind of shake your wrists out. You can slowly come out of Malasana however you want to. You can roll forward, you can roll back, you can extend your legs. Take your time here. This is a little bit of the rebound here. I'm going to suggest some Cobra Cycling for a counter pose after that squat. For Cobra, bring yourself all the way onto your belly, legs comfortably extended out behind you. And then bring your hands in underneath your shoulder on either side of your torso. Keep your elbows in. And then on an inhale and lift your heart up and forward off of the floor as far as it goes for you. Now, this means gentle muscle engagement in the back of the torso. You don't have to go up very far. You're just trying to engage the back line of muscles in your torso and then lower yourself back down. Maybe a resting breath here or two. We'll do this again, so when you feel ready, on an inhale, use the inhale to lift your shoulders up. Lift your collarbones up and away from the floor here. Maybe pause here for a breath. And then very gently lower yourself back down. And then bring yourself up. Maybe any other kind of movement or that you would need to work out the reverberation from the yoga squat, and then we'll set up for the next posture. The next posture is Cattail Pose. In Cattail Pose, it's a combination of twist and back bend, and maybe even a thigh stretch here. So you'll make your way onto your back. You can do cattail in stages to find your version of cattail here. So stage number 1 for cattail is, as you're lying on your back, legs extended, raise the right leg up towards the ceiling as far as it will go. And it's extended as it will go here. It doesn't have to be straight, just extended here. And then lower the right leg over to the left side until the right foot's on the ground. And then inch yourself onto your left side here. So this, and you can rest your head in your forearm like I'm doing. This is stage number 1. So if this is enough for you, this is where you stay. Stage number 2 for cattail is bend the bottom left knee. Bring the left shin in towards the left thigh. And reach back with your left hand. See if you can grab the left foot. Now if you can't reach, you can just fake it. Or you can take a strap or a towel or something, wrap it around the foot if you really want to catch the foot. This is stage number 2. See how this feels, and you can go ahead and stay here if you want to. Stage number 3 is melt the right shoulder back towards the ground so that you come into a twist here. It doesn't have to make it to the ground, but it is melting back. And normally, most of us find some sort of stopping point here in this posture when we get to this point here. So this is cattail. And then we'll stay here. We'll stay here for about 3 minutes. in Cattail. So the constellation Cassiopeia and its asterism, its zigzag pattern, or its W pattern of stars, bright stars, second magnitude stars. They're not the brightest stars, but they're bright enough to catch one's attention and to see under light polluted skies here. They're very far in the northern sky, which means if you live in the southern hemisphere, you probably won't see them. If you can see them at all, they'll just grovel along the northern horizon for short periods of the year. But if you're far enough north in the northern hemisphere, if you live in Canada or in Europe, then this constellation is circumpolar. It never sets. It just slowly circles the North Star, which means whenever you get a clear night in those high latitudes, you'll be able to recognize this amazing asterism of stars. It was used a lot by early navigators because it was just so noticeable and so reliable. I thought I'd talk a little bit about not all of the bright stars, we don't have time, but maybe a few of the brighter ones. The brightest star in the constellation is the star that is at one of the vertexes of the V's in the W shape, that star, and it's slightly orangish in color. It's a star named Shidar. And even though all the stars are almost equally bright, it tends to be the brightest star most of the time. Although the other stars are variable, and they sometimes can outshine the star. So Shidar is actually known as an orange giant star. It's an orange giant that's about 4 times as massive as the sun. It's an evolved star in that it's used up all of its hydrogen fuel and it's starting to burn helium in its core. This is one reason why it's orange and it's so big. It's getting older and turning into a red giant, but right now it's still just an orange giant here. And it's 228 light years away. Now that's the main component. Another characteristic about stars is that most stars are also multiple star systems. And Shidar is no different. Shidar is actually part of a four-star system, but this orange giant star is the main component. The other stars are small. They're tiny dwarf stars. One of them maybe is a white dwarf star, and so that's the brightest star, and it's kind of in the middle of the main pattern of stars. It's not the central star. We'll get to that in a moment, but it's, like I said, it's one of the vertices of the W. The second brightest star is on the edge of these 5 bright stars. It's called Calf. And Calf is a star that's bright, not necessarily because it's big, like Shidar is. Calf is bright because it's close. So Calf is a star that's about twice as massive as the sun. And it's 54 light, so it's a little bit bigger than the sun. It's 54 light years away. And Calf is a variable star. So just one more breath here. And then if you have the bottom foot, slowly release the bottom foot. You can bend the top knee, roll that top leg on top of this lower leg, and slowly roll yourself back onto your back here. Slowly inch your way back. A good counter pose for a cattail is to just draw your knees into your chest and give your knees a hug. Maybe waterfall is a good pose, or maybe just some other kind of resting pose here. So notice the reverberation. This is kind of maybe an important part of Yin, to just notice the reaction, the response of your body from coming out of the Yin posture. But we'll go ahead and get set up for the other side here. So the other side of cattail is both legs are extended, and then raise the other leg, the left leg, up as high as it will go. Lower the left leg over to the right until it touches down on the ground. Inch yourself onto your right side here. This is stage number 1. You can choose to stay here or begin to bend the bottom right knee, reach back with the left hand, and See if you can catch hold of that foot with the left hand. This is stage number 2. Give yourself permission to stay here if this is enough. Otherwise, release your head and your neck and allow your left shoulder to roll back until it naturally stops for you. There's props. You can put props under here. Maybe you need a prop under your leg, or maybe you need a prop under your shoulder. So feel free to grab props here and place them where you need them. And so find your version of cattail, and we'll settle here for another 3 to 4 minutes here. Calf is a variable star that it spins. It spins very, very quickly, and because it spins very, very quickly, it's also radially expanding and contracting. And that's why it's a variable star. So just like the breath work we did at the beginning of practice, calf varies in brightness because it's expanding, getting brighter, and then it's contracting and getting dimmer. It also has some interesting asymmetrical brightness variations that go on too. Oh, incidentally, Shidar is considered a variable star too, although it doesn't vary very much in brightness, so it's on the edge of being just considered a normal star, whereas Calf is very much a variable star. The interesting thing about Calf is it's all by itself, so it's not a multiple star system. It's just by itself. It's very similar to a lot of other stars that are close to us. So it's mainly bright because it's close, whereas Shidar is bright because it's big. The third star I'd like to talk about is the middle star of the zigzag pattern. That middle star is actually, its formal name is Gamma Cassiopeia, and that just simply means it's the third or fourth brightest star in the asterism. It's a variable star too, and it can vary so much that it actually can outshine Shidar, the brightest star. So Gamma Cassiopeia is a blue giant star. So it's 17 times the mass of the sun. And it's also an evolved star in that it's running out of hydrogen too and starting to burn helium. But it's so massive that it's very hot and still appears blue. It's also very far away. It's 550 light years away. It's a variable star too, and it varies because it's so massive that it's throwing off material in its outer layers. So as it evolves, it throws off shells of material around it, which gives it its variability pattern. The shell of material obscures the star and dims it a bit, and then as the shell clears away, it becomes brighter again. But very, very big stars. So note that even though these bright stars in the asterism look like they're in the same area of the sky, they're actually different types of stars, different and very, very different distances from the sun. So they're actually not really related to each other than the fact that we seem to see them in this nice, beautiful pattern in the sky here. So about 3 or 4 more breaths on this side. Incidentally, the more common name for Gamma Cassiopeia is Navi, and Navi comes from American astronauts. So it turns out that Gamma Cassiopeia was used extensively by American astronauts in the early days of the astronaut and space program that led up to the Apollo missions. And they nicknamed the star Navi just because they used it as a bright star to navigate by. And so sometimes the star is known as Navi here. So just slowly come out of this posture. You can release the foot. You can bend the knee and bring the top leg over and then slowly roll back onto your back here. And then a little bit of counter movement again. You can bring your knees into your chest again if you wish and just kind of gently rock back and forth. Or maybe some other kind of movement here. The next Yin posture is Milky Way Pose, which is a supported bridge pose. You'll need some sort of prop for this. So either a couple of yoga blocks, or one yoga block might work. Some books, if you don't have yoga blocks here. For the supported bridge, there'll be other options too. So I'll demonstrate the supported bridge pose. You'll lay on your back, initially knees bent, feet on the floor, and then you'll lift your hips up to place one or two blocks underneath your low torso, someplace where it's nice and stable. So there's this flat, bony part of your pelvic bone that you're kind of aiming for with the props. And that's the most kind of comfortable and solid place to place the blocks. So it's not feeling comfortable and solid. Probably you need to adjust the blocks until you get it underneath that point in your low back here. I've got two because they feel more stable than one, but you can do just one. This is the beginning of this posture. So you can stay here, knees bent. But the idea behind this posture is to stretch out the whole front line of the body. And so you experiment with extending both legs out. This is yin, so you relax the muscles in the legs, and if they fall together or fall apart, that's okay. And then what you're doing is gently opening up and stretching this front line. We used to call this Psoas Stretch because it gets into it can be pretty intense for people with really tight hip flexors. In fact, it might be so painful that maybe you have to keep your knees bent. But I would suggest adjusting the height of your prop. So I've got the block on the middle setting. You can do a low setting. That might feel better. You can do a high setting if you're not feeling anything and you need more oomph in this posture here. For some people, no amount of setting will make this posture feel good. And so if you found your setting, then you will stay here for a long stay of about 5 minutes or so. Some alternatives to this posture. Sphinx is one of them. So the supported bridge pose is essentially a back bend and a heart opener. So if you're wanting to stay with that theme, you can do Sphinx so that you're back bending and your heart opening here. So this is maybe a more accessible version of this. Or maybe you want a more intense version. So you can do saddle pose. And saddle pose is you sit back on or in between your heels, and then you lower your torso down to the ground. So this is another alternative to do if this Milky Way pose is just creating, for some people it might create pain in their low back here. And a little bit of compression and intensity is okay, but not pain here. Otherwise we'll stay here. 4. A few more minutes or so. So the idea is to find a version of this posture where you can there's really no work for muscles to do, right? And so you can really work on watching your breath, using your breath to soften the muscle toning so that you really are just kind of letting gravity and time take over in this posture. Doesn't mean the posture is going to be comfortable. I think for a lot of people, this posture is pretty uncomfortable. It's not meant to be painful or injurious, but it is stretching out those tight hip flexors, and that's maybe what feels really uncomfortable in this posture. It's also compressing the hip bone in the low back. You can maybe feel some compression there too. Head and neck and shoulders should be nice and neutral and comfortable in this pose. So I have a reason for practicing this posture in this practice because the Milky Way, the arm of the Milky Way, passes right through the asterism of Cassiopeia. So if you're away from city lights, have a really, really dark and clear sky, that will be obvious. You'll see the bright zigzag pattern of stars, and then you'll see them kind of in front of the arm of our home galaxy, the Milky Way. So thus, Milky Way pose, in honor of that graceful arch of stars that is the is looking into the disk and the arm of our own home spiral galaxy here. So let's continue to watch your breath. Notice your sensations. Give yourself permission to come out early if you need to, or stay longer here. We have a few more minutes here in this posture. Because it lies in the middle of the Milky Way arm, there's a lot of interesting objects that are in the area of this asterism of bright stars. There's lots of open clusters, which are little clusters of bright young stars that are actually associated with each other. They were all born roughly in the same place at the same time, and they're still grouped closely together, still associated with one another, and they're oftentimes very pretty to look at through a small telescope. There's also some supernova remnants. These are gas and dust cloud leftovers from an exploded star. And indeed, there's some famous ones. So the most famous supernova remnant is called Cassiopeia, and it's famous because it's the brightest source of radio light in the sky. So it's the brightest radio astronomy source from a supernova that is believed to have happened in the late 1600s. So maybe somewhere between 1670 and 1690, a star exploded and left this shell that's radiating a lot of radio waves. So it's a famous object for radio astronomers. There is also another supernova remnant known as Tycho's supernova. This is historically significant because Tycho was an astronomer in the 1500s, and in 1572 Tycho looked up at the sky and he saw this extra star, which was the supernova, in the constellation Cassiopeia. He knew the stars well because he was an astronomer, and he had to take a double take. In fact, he had to ask some other people if they actually saw that star, because in Tycho's time, it was believed the night sky was perfect and unchanging. And obviously, if an extra star shows up, it's definitely not unchanging. It's changed, and stars showed up, which is kind of very, very disturbing. And it was disturbing to Tycho, but he also realized that it's not true that the night sky is unchanging. Things are changing all the time in the night sky. So about one more minute here, if that's appropriate for you. Get in touch with how you're feeling. If you're still at a good edge, then maybe one more minute is okay here. But of course, the name Cassiopeia comes from Western Greek mythology that kind of developed their own system of constellation and what they think they saw. So the Greeks named the constellation after a figure from their own mythology known as the Queen of Ethiopia. But other cultures saw other things, like in China. China sees Cassiopeia as the zigzag pattern as the tail of a giant constellation known as the White Tiger of the West. In northern traditions, say in the native peoples of northern Norway and Finland and Sweden, those native peoples saw elk antlers or moose antlers in that zigzag pattern. Northern native peoples of Siberia actually saw reindeer. They thought they felt the bright stars represented reindeer. So just one more minute here, and then we're finally coming out of this long, long hold. So take your time here as you're coming out. So my first suggestion is slowly bend each leg. Place your feet back down onto the ground. You might already start to feel reverberation here. And then root through your shoulders and your feet. Lift your hips up high enough so that you can take your hands and remove whatever prop you were using. And then maybe slowly with control, lower yourself down all the way onto the floor. And then an integration activity before we come into our final resting pose. I'm going to suggest reclined windshield wipers. So feet make their way away from each other, maybe towards the edge of a mat if you're using a mat. And then lower both knees over to one side. Maybe pause for a moment. And then slowly breathing back up to center, lower them over to the other side. Pause for a moment. And then bring them back up to center. You continue with this slow cycling back and forth, this windshield wiper maneuver here. Windshield wipers is a common term. They didn't have windshield wipers 5,000 years ago. And then at some point, it's a little bit of free-form yoga. So any other kind of movement that you would like to do to kind of notice the reverberation, work out the kinks and the imbalances of practice, and then move into your resting pose for the end of practice. Your resting pose can be lying just on the ground in a traditional Savasana shape. It can be seated in a meditative position, or I'll suggest, if you have a chair handy, a restorative posture where you take the chair and you're ultimately going to lie your shins on this chair. So you maybe want some soft padding. So if you have a blanket handy, drape the blanket over the seat of the chair just to create some softness. And then what you'll do is you'll lie in front of the chair, hips kind of close to the chair, and then you'll bring your legs up, kind of like legs up the wall pose, with your shins resting comfortably on the seat of the chair, and then the rest of your body is resting gently onto the floor like normal Shavasana. So this is kind of halfway between laying completely on the floor and being in kind of a legs up the wall type restorative posture here. And then you can just notice how this feels here. And notice I grab a pillow, so if you have other soft things, if you're chilly, put on extra clothing here. And then soften and release and let go. This is your time. This is your time to really let go here. Release your face. Feel the support of the floor underneath your torso. Arms are in a place where they're soft and supported here, maybe far enough away from your torso so that the arms can roll out, the palms can face up towards the ceiling. Eyes are soft, they can gently close. You can feel the rise and the fall of your breath here. And if you want to, if you need something to occupy your mind, to keep it in a soft state, you can go back to the initial visualizations at the beginning of practice. Imagine your body, your breath, as a variable star. That's very, very softly pulsating in a regular rhythm. So again, maybe on the inhale, your star grows brighter, grows broader, grows more energetic, and then on the exhale, it softens, it contracts, it quiesces here until the next inhale, where again it grows bright. And then continue that for some time, for some breaths. slowly begin to bring yourself back. You can deepen your breath. You can start making little motions with fingers, with toes, maybe with hands, with feet, with arms, with legs. Maybe gentle movements with head and with your neck here. At some point, maybe bend your knees a little bit more, raise your legs up off of the chair, and gently roll over to one side. When you get there, stay there for a moment and reflect on your practice. Maybe reflect with some gratitude on your efforts, and also some deep gratitude for you, your manifestation, your unique embodiment in this universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you feel ready, bring yourself up to a comfortable seat. Establish that seat. Find your inner ground. Notice your breath. Bring your hands together at heart center. And I'll end this practice with an Om. You can simply listen or maybe join in. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste.